Recap. In the previous book, the portrait's secret young Burtrum Foghorn and his father Percival acquire a mysterious portrait of their pirate ancestor, Captain Charles Foghorn, at an auction. This portrait, centuries earlier, was used by Charles Foghorn to hide a treasure map within its frame. Meanwhile, a criminal named Blackwood, under orders from his boss Jaco, manages to steal the portrait, suspecting it to hold valuable secrets. Jaco immediately embarks on a voyage to recover Charles Foghorn's treasure. Burtrum, fascinated by his family's history, dreams of high-sea adventures and treasures. His friend Herbert, known for his love of food and mischief, joins him in pondering the possibilities of the hidden treasure. Their curiosity leads them to plan a closer examination of the portrait upon Burtrum's return home. However, in a twist of fate, the portrait is stolen from the Foghorn residence. Mr. Foghorn, having discovered and photographed the hidden map before the theft, is left puzzled and worried. The portrait is later found discarded in a rubbish skip, leading to speculation that the thief was after the treasure map. The police recover and return the portrait, leaving the Foghorns cautious and alert. As the story unfolds, Burtrum and Herbert find themselves magically transported back in time to the era of Captain Charles Foghorn, experiencing firsthand the life of pirates. They engage in ship activities, learn about maritime life, and face the harsh realities of the time. The boys wake up back in their present time, still dressed in pirate attire, confirming their extraordinary adventure wasn't just a dream. The story sets the stage for more thrilling escapades, promising to continue in the Daring Dungeon Deception. The Daring Dungeon Deception. Chapter 1. Burtrum could hear his sister at a distance upstairs in her bedroom, karaoke singing into her hairbrush accompanying a Sister Sledge remix. "We are family," she screeched, somewhat off-key. Despite this, Burtrum was peacefully enjoying his superhero comic book when suddenly, the singing ceased and an upstairs window banged open. To his dismay, he saw his prized Batman mug hurtling out of the aperture. Leaping from his chair, his eyes followed the mug's trajectory towards the ground, his expression shifting from shock to sheer horror as he recognized the airborne object. It crashed onto the garden patio below, shattering into 1,000 fragments. Giggles echoed from upstairs, and Burtrum knew it was his younger sister, Penelope, up to her usual antics. Burtrum stormed upstairs, his face beetroot red with anger, looking for his little sister. Following closely behind, Arabella, their mum, reached out, grabbing Bertram's arm to stop his progress, fearing what he might do in such a fit of anger. "What's the matter, Burtrum?" "She did it again, Mum," Burtrum shouted, throwing his arms up in frustration. "This time she threw my Batman mug out of the window and it was completely smashed and ruined." "I loved that mug. Who did it?" Arabella asked. "Penelope, of course," Burtrum yelled, pointing at his younger sister. Penelope put her hands on her hips and retorted, "You deserved it, Burtrum. You were being mean to me." "I was not," Burtrum protested. "I was just trying to read my book, and you kept interrupting me with your stupid tea party." "But I wanted you to play dressing up with me," Penelope said, her lower lip quivering. Arabella sighed. "Penelope, you can't throw things out of the window, and Burtrum, you can't be mean to your sister." "I'll get you a new mug, Burtrum. Now, both of you, go to your rooms and calm down. We'll talk about this later." Burtrum grumbled as he stomped up the next flight of stairs to his room, followed by Penelope, who skipped happily along. Arabella shook her head, wondering how she was going to manage two children who often annoyed each other to the point of breaking things or causing a scene. It seemed like they were always at each other's throats, but Arabella knew deep down that they truly cared for one another. She went back to the kitchen, hoping for a moment of peace. While she prepared lunch, she couldn't help but smile at the sound of Penelope's laughter and Bertram's muffled protests coming from upstairs. Despite the occasional bickering, Arabella carried on, hoping the argument wouldn't flare up again. Bertram's excitement was palpable as he entered the classroom, chuffed to be back at school with his best mate Herbert and away from his little sister Penelope, whose constant silliness seemed to know no bounds. As he took his seat next to Herbert, Burtrum couldn't help but share his relief. "Herbert, you have no idea how glad I am to be back here with you, away from Penelope," Burtrum said, shaking his head. "She's been driving me round the bend all weekend." Herbert laughed. "I bet she was a handful, mate." But look on the bright side, we're reunited now, aren't we? Chapter 2. 2 weeks later. The headmaster, Mr. Curry, strode down the school corridor with furrowed brows, deep in thought. He couldn't help but notice the growing number of peculiar red and black blotches appearing on the walls throughout the school. Miss Jenkins, the English teacher, walked alongside him, equally puzzled by the mysterious marks. "Have you any idea what's causing these blotches, Miss Jenkins?" Mr. Curry inquired, stopping for a moment to inspect one of the marks closely. Miss Jenkins shook her head. "Not the foggiest, sir. It's quite baffling. They seem to have cropped up overnight, but it's clear the children must be involved somehow." "Yes, it certainly seems that way," Mr. Curry agreed, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "It's almost as if someone is deliberately swatting flies, but with some sort of device." Miss Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "Like a fly swat? Perhaps we have a secret pest control agent among the students." Mr. Curry chuckled. "Unlikely, but I do appreciate your humor. No, we must get to the bottom of this. We can't have our school walls looking like a battlefield." An idea suddenly came to him. What if we installed hidden cameras to catch the culprits in action? We could position them strategically around the school. Miss Jenkins nodded. "That's a brilliant idea, sir. I'm sure we'll catch the little rascals red-handed. Or should I say, red-blotched?" A determined glint appeared in Mr. Curry's eyes. "Indeed. I'll have a word with our IT department to set up the cameras immediately." Over the next few days, the hidden cameras were discreetly installed around the school, capturing every nook and cranny. Mr. Curry eagerly reviewed the footage each day, determined to uncover the truth behind the mysterious fly swats. Finally, on a Tuesday afternoon, Mr. Curry's patience was rewarded. 2 weeks earlier. During maths class, Burtrum noticed a fly buzzing about the room, occasionally landing on the pristine white wall. An idea suddenly sparked in his mind, and he grinned as he remembered the box of extra-thick rubber bands he'd bought while shopping with his mum. Perfect for shooting flies. When the maths teacher stepped out of the room for a moment, Burtrum saw his chance. He quickly reached into his rucksack and pulled out a couple of rubber bands. With a mischievous smile, he handed one to Herbert and whispered, "Watch this." Herbert's eyes widened with curiosity as he observed Burtrum stretching the rubber band to the full length of his arm like an archer preparing to shoot an arrow. With a swift release, the rubber band flew across the room, swatting the fly against the wall. The entire class erupted in cheers and applause. The teacher returned to the classroom, and silence fell immediately. Somehow, she didn't notice the tiny mark on the wall, and the lesson resumed. As the class ended, students gathered around Burtrum, eager to get their hands on rubber bands of their own. "Burtrum, that was brilliant," Herbert said, grinning from ear to ear. "You have to teach me how to do that." As they walked out of the classroom, Burtrum and Herbert shared a conspiratorial smile, knowing they had just started a new and entertaining school pastime. The days went by. Thick rubber bands started to appear everywhere, under chairs, on window ledges, and so too did the number of elastic band archers. The walls were increasingly being covered in red and black blotches. However, everyone was hiding their secret activity from the teachers. 3 weeks later on Tuesday afternoon. "Aha!" Mr. Curry exclaimed, unable to hide his excitement. "We've got them. Those cheeky scamps, using rubber bands to swat flies." He watched the video recording as Burtrum and Herbert stealthily pulled out their thick rubber bands, aiming at unsuspecting flies and leaving yet another blotch on the wall. He called Miss Jenkins into his office to share the discovery. As they watched the footage together, they couldn't help but shake their heads at the students' antics. "Well, I must say, they've certainly been resourceful," Miss Jenkins commented, trying to maintain a stern expression. "What will you do with them, sir?" Mr. Curry leaned back in his chair, contemplating the situation. "Well, I think a stern talking to is in order, along with, I know just what's needed to teach them a lesson." Later that day, Burtrum and Herbert were summoned to Mr. Curry's office. The boys exchanged nervous glances as they knocked on the heavy wooden door, wondering what could be the reason behind their summons. "Come in," Mr. Curry called out, his voice stern. As they entered, the boys noticed the large screen on the wall displaying the hidden camera footage of their fly-swatting antics. They gulped, realizing they had been caught in the act. "Burtrum, Herbert," Mr. Curry began, I presume you know why you're here? The boys hesitated for a moment, then Burtrum sheepishly replied, Yes, sir. It's about the, fly swatting, isn't it? Indeed, Mr. Curry confirmed. Now, before we discuss the matter at hand, tell me, do you boys enjoy your art classes? The boys exchanged puzzled looks but answered in unison, Yes, sir. Ah, that's splendid, Mr. Curry said with a hint of a smile. You see, I believe in making the punishment fit the crime, and I've come up with the perfect plan. The boys shifted uncomfortably, sensing that their punishment would be no walk in the park. Mr. Curry continued, As you know, the school walls have become rather unsightly due to your little hobby. So, your punishment will be to clean and repaint all the walls in the school. The boys' jaws dropped as they stared at Mr. Curry in disbelief. All the walls, sir? Herbert stammered. Every single one, Mr. Curry confirmed, and I expect the job to be done to a high standard. After all, you both enjoy art, don't you? Realizing the enormity of the task ahead, Burtrum and Herbert couldn't help but regret starting the fly-swatting craze. Yes, sir, they mumbled in unison, their shoulders slumped in defeat. Very well, Mr. Curry said. You will begin your punishment after school today and continue every day until the job is complete. Now, off you go, and remember, no more fly-swatting. As they left the headmaster's office, Burtrum and Herbert trudged down the corridor, feeling the weight of their upcoming punishment. Blimey, Burtrum, Herbert sighed. I can't believe we have to clean and paint the entire school. I know, mate, Burtrum replied, shaking his head. We definitely won't be starting any more fly-swatting crazes anytime soon. As they continued down the hallway, they couldn't help but notice every fly-swat blotch on the walls, each one now serving as a reminder of the immense task that lay ahead. Chapter 3. At last, after several days of cleaning and painting walls, Burtrum was eager to go home for a well-deserved rest, even if it meant putting up with his sister. He climbed into the back of the car, where Penelope was already waiting, dressed in her riding gear, complete with jodhpurs, riding hat, and crop. Oh, no, Burtrum groaned, anticipating what was to come. Does this mean we're going past that daft riding school and we'll have to watch Penelope prancing about on a horse? It's so dull. I reckon I'd rather watch paint dry. Of course, he knew he wouldn't actually prefer that, having spent the entire week doing just that. Sorry, love, Arabella apologized, but it's the only way we can fit everything in. So there, Penelope chimed in before blowing a noisy raspberry. Well, can Herbert come to stay then? Burtrum asked, trying to salvage some enjoyment from the situation. No problem, Arabella agreed, as long as his mum is okay with it. We can swing by his house after the riding school, Percival suggested. And it's nice to see you too, he added with a hint of sarcasm, implying that Burtrum hadn't greeted them properly. Despite the prospect of watching his sister's riding lesson, the thought of having Herbert over for a visit brought a small smile to Burtrum's face, making the journey home seem just a bit more bearable. As they pulled into the riding school car park, Penelope practically leapt out of the car, her enthusiasm for riding apparent. The riding school was a picturesque establishment, complete with a white-fenced outdoor arena, a large indoor arena, and several well-maintained stables, housing an array of magnificent horses. The scent of fresh hay and horses filled the air as the family made their way towards the arena where Penelope's lesson was about to begin. Burtrum lagged behind, his enthusiasm noticeably lacking compared to his sister's. Inside the arena, a group of children and their horses were already gathered, chatting excitedly as they prepared for their lesson. Penelope's riding instructor, a tall, middle-aged woman with a friendly face, waved at them as they approached. Ah, Penelope, you're just in time, she called out. Go and fetch Toffee from the stable, and we'll get started. With a beaming smile, Penelope dashed off to collect her favorite horse, a gentle chestnut mare named Toffee. Meanwhile, Arabella found a spot on the viewing benches for her and Burtrum to sit and watch the lesson unfold. As the lesson began, the children expertly guided their horses through various exercises and routines, trotting, cantering, and even executing small jumps. Though Burtrum tried his best to look disinterested, he couldn't help but be impressed by his sister's riding skills. Penelope and Toffee moved in harmony, their every movement fluid and coordinated. Halfway through the lesson, Penelope caught her brother's eye and shot him a cheeky grin, clearly proud of her abilities. Burtrum couldn't help but crack a small smile in response, begrudgingly acknowledging her talent. As the lesson continued, Arabella turned to Burtrum and asked, "So, have you thought about giving riding a go yourself?" Burtrum hesitated, then replied, "Maybe, Mum, but for now, I think I'll stick to watching." With the lesson over, Penelope dismounted Toffee, giving her a loving pat on the neck before leading her back to the stable. As they all walked back to the car, even Burtrum had to admit that the riding lesson hadn't been as dull as he'd expected. Chapter 4. Back at Burtrum's house, the boys were looking forward to a relaxing evening after a long day. However, Arabella had other plans for them. "Boys," she said, as they entered the living room, "I need you to entertain Penelope for a while. She's in the mood for playing dress-up, and I could use a little break." Though neither of them was particularly excited about the idea, they reluctantly agreed. Herbert shot Burtrum a knowing look, as if to say, "Well, it could be worse." With a sigh, the boys headed upstairs to Burtrum's room, where they rummaged through his wardrobe in search of costumes. They decided to don their seaman's clothing that they returned with from their last adventure with Great Uncle Charles. Penelope, meanwhile, remained in her riding attire, feeling every bit as regal as a pirate queen. Her crop now served as a scepter, and she held her head high, imagining herself as the ruler of the high seas. Once everyone was dressed, the trio gathered in the living room, where they transformed the space into a makeshift pirate ship, complete with cushions as makeshift barrels and a blanket draped over the back of the sofa to serve as a sail. "Ahoy, mateys!" Burtrum called out in his best pirate voice. "Let's set sail for treasure and adventure." Herbert and Penelope avidly joined in, and they spent the next hour or so immersed in their imaginary world, laughing and playing together as they navigated through treacherous waters and battled fierce sea monsters. As the evening wore on, the trio enjoyed a hearty meal together before deciding it was time to head upstairs. As they began to ascend the staircase, all three glanced up at the portrait of Great Uncle Charles, which hung proudly on the wall. To their astonishment, Great Uncle Charles's eyes seemed to twinkle and, in the blink of an eye, he winked at them. Just like their previous adventure, the trio felt a sudden surge of energy, and before they knew it, they were being pulled into a swirling, multicolored, multidimensional wormhole. The vivid colors and dizzying sensation of hurtling through time and space left them disoriented and awestruck. When the whirlwind of their journey suddenly subsided, they found themselves standing on the edge of a bustling harbor. Numerous magnificent galleons lay moored in the bay, their sails flapping gently in the breeze and casting striking silhouettes against the horizon. The trio gazed around in wonder, taking in the sights and sounds of their new surroundings. The salty sea air, the creaking of wooden planks beneath their feet, and the distant calls of sailors all hinted at an adventure-filled world waiting to be explored. Penelope let out a startled scream, her eyes wide with shock as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. The boys, though surprised themselves, quickly hushed her. "Please, be quiet," Burtrum whispered urgently, his eyes darting around to see if anyone had noticed them. "It's all right, we've done this before." Penelope's heart pounded in her chest. What do you mean?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where are we?" Burtrum placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We've just traveled through time," he said gently. She stared at him, disbelief and fear mingling in her gaze. "Time travel? How is that even possible?" she murmured, her mind racing to make sense of everything. "Trust us," Herbert chimed in, offering a comforting smile. "We know it sounds crazy, but we've been here before, and we promise, we'll get back home." Penelope took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She looked into her brother's eyes and saw the sincerity there. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered, "but you have to stay close. I'm scared." "Don't worry," Burtrum replied, squeezing her hand. "We'll stick together." For Burtrum and Herbert, a wave of anxiety washed over them a few moments later as they scanned their surroundings, unable to discern their next move. "What now?" they both exclaimed in unison, the uncertainty evident in their voices. "Let's have a walk around," suggested Herbert. "Maybe we can figure something out. At least we're dressed for the part." "Agreed," replied Burtrum, glancing at Penelope in her jodhpurs and riding boots. "You'll just have to make do." They headed towards the buildings that appeared to form a small town by the docks. As they walked, they could hear a man shouting nearby, so they decided to approach and listen to what he was saying. "It's the town crier," Penelope exclaimed. "We covered this at school. That's how people got their news in the olden days." "Hear ye, hear ye," the man called out as he rang a large bell. "Pirates arrested and imprisoned for robbing the Church of Gold. Trial date to be set," he continued. "Goodness," said Herbert, recalling the legend that Burtrum had shared with him. "You don't suppose that could be your great-uncle Charles and his crew, do you?" After the crier finished his announcements and paused, Burtrum approached him. "Which way to the prison?" he asked. The man provided directions before adding, "Bit young for that, aren't you, lad?" Penelope, wide-eyed and confused, asked, "What's going on? Who's great-uncle Charles, and why is he in prison?" Burtrum took a deep breath and said, "All right, Penelope, let me tell you what's going on. You see, our great-uncle Charles, a respected merchant, was falsely accused of piracy and wrongly imprisoned. Our dad bought his portrait at an auction and found a hidden treasure map inside the frame. Now, here's the really wild part. Just a few weeks ago, Herbert and I time-traveled for the first time and landed straight onto Captain Charles's ship, wearing nothing but our pajamas." Penelope, with a cheeky grin, responded, "You're kidding. In your pajamas? How embarrassing." Burtrum, feeling a little vexed at her remark, continued describing the events. Penelope's eyes grew even wider. She looked at him, a mix of disbelief and fascination on her face, and said, "You're telling me you climbed the mast and fired cannons? That's just mad." Burtrum nodded and replied, "Yeah, it was quite the experience. Don't worry, after we fell asleep in the past, we woke up safe and sound at home." Penelope struggled to process everything, her mind filled with questions and her imagination running wild. "You mentioned in the legend that someone helped Uncle Charles break out of prison, right?" she asked. "Yes," replied Burtrum. "And we've traveled back in time?" she continued. The boys nodded in agreement. "Well, perhaps it was us who broke him out of prison," she suggested. "Gosh, you're right," interjected Herbert. "We need to plan a prison break. In that case, we must get into the prison to coordinate our plan with Uncle Charles," said Burtrum, thinking aloud. The trio followed the directions given by the town crier, eventually arriving at the imposing stone building that served as the prison. The structure loomed over them, its grey walls cold and unwelcoming. The atmosphere was heavy with tension, and a sense of dread settled upon them as they cautiously approached. The prison's barred windows were narrow and set high above the ground. Burtrum, Herbert, and Penelope moved stealthily along the exterior, their eyes scanning each window in hopes of catching a glimpse of Captain Charles. Their hearts raced, and they did their best to remain inconspicuous in case any guards were nearby. As they peered through the iron bars, they saw a variety of prisoners locked away in small, dimly lit cells. Some paced restlessly, while others sat on the cold stone floor, their faces etched with despair. Despite the disheartening scene, the trio persisted in their search for Captain Charles, their determination driving them forward. Finally, after what felt like forever, they spotted a man who bore a striking resemblance to the portrait of Great-Uncle Charles hanging in their home. He was sitting on a wooden bench, his hands shackled and a forlorn expression on his face. The children exchanged glances, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement, as they realized they had found the Foghorn's ancestor. The question that now loomed in their minds was how to help him escape from this dreadful place. Casting a cautious glance around to ensure they weren't at risk of being overheard, Burtrum whispered, "Any ideas on how we can get in to see Great-Uncle Charles?" "We can pretend to be visiting family," Penelope replied. "Good idea," agreed Herbert. As the trio approached the prison entrance to visit Captain Charles, they pretended to be family members visiting their father. The guard raised an eyebrow upon seeing Penelope's jodhpurs, but allowed them to enter after consulting with Charles, who played along despite being puzzled. Once inside, they were led to a large cell containing Charles and his crew. "Thundering typhoons," exclaimed Charles loudly before realizing his mistake and continuing in a whispered tone. "It's the two boys who appeared and suddenly disappeared from our ship a few weeks ago. I'm glad you've made your reappearance." Penelope stepped forward, putting her little hand through the prison bars into the cell for the captain to shake. "I'm Penelope, Burtrum's sister." "Pleased to meet you," replied Charles warmly, shaking her hand gently. "You must be my great-great-niece-to-be." "Something like that," Penelope said. Burtrum interjected, "Captain, time is short. We need to make a plan to break you and your crew out." In the dimly lit prison cell, Burtrum, Herbert, Penelope, and Captain Charles huddled together as they hurriedly brainstormed a daring plan for a prison break. Excitement and tension filled the air as they bounced ideas off each other. Herbert suddenly had a burst of inspiration. "What if we use the cannons on Captain Charles's ship to blast the prison walls?" he suggested, his eyes shining with excitement. Captain Charles stroked his beard, considering the idea. With no better alternatives, everyone quickly agreed to the plan. Charles then provided them with detailed instructions on aiming the cannons and selecting the appropriate firepower. "Remember your cannon drills," Captain Charles said authoritatively. "Swab the barrel, load the powder charge, insert the projectile, and ram it home. Prime the cannon, insert a priming charge and then aim, 5 degrees offset for the wind and a 45-degree elevation. You're at about 1,000 yards. You should shoot just over the prison with a 9 pounds powder charge, so start with 8 pounds and reduce the charge to lower the trajectory of the shot." The captain continued, "Our crew will pass the word around to the prisoners to keep their heads down. The more who escape, the better. It'll create a diversion and keep the guards occupied while we make our way to the ship." Everyone nodded in agreement, energized by the plan they had just concocted. As they prepared to put their daring scheme into action, there was a sense of camaraderie and determination in the air. As the heavy door creaked open, a stern guard stepped inside. "Time's up. Visitors must leave," he barked, his gaze cold and unyielding. Burtrum felt a surge of panic. They hadn't finalized the plan yet. He looked to Captain Charles, who gave him a subtle nod. "We'll find a way," the captain whispered hurriedly. Penelope's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her brother's arm. The reality of their situation was sinking in, and fear gnawed at her stomach. Herbert swallowed hard, trying to appear brave despite the lump forming in his throat. As they were ushered out, Captain Charles called after them, his voice tinged with hope and a hint of desperation. "Take care, my dear ones, and remember, courage and heart will see us through." Burtrum glanced back one last time, meeting the captain's eyes. "We won't let you down," he thought to himself, determination hardening his resolve. Outside the prison walls, the weight of their mission pressed upon them. "This is serious," Herbert muttered, his usual cheerfulness replaced with concern. "I know," Burtrum replied softly. He looked at his sister, noticing the uncertainty in her eyes. "But we can do this. Together." Penelope mustered a small smile. "I'm with you," she said, her voice steadier now. Chapter 5. Upon arriving at the ship, they raced up the gangplank to find the vessel deserted, save for a couple of scurrying rats. They headed to the gun deck and chose the cannon most aligned with the distant prison, which now appeared rather small. "This one will do," shouted Burtrum, feeling exhilarated. "Show Penelope how to swab the barrel," he ordered, as he started weighing out the powder and putting into practice the skills he had learned the last time he was on board the Victory with the captain and his crew. Soon, they were ready to fire. Herbert lit the fuse and shouted, "Stand back and cover your ears." The cannon fired with a deafening crash and recoiled violently as the cannonballs soared over the docks in the direction of the prison, just passing above it as the captain had predicted. The second battery was loaded with a slightly reduced charge. Again, the cannon roared and recoiled, but this time the cannonball struck the prison wall, causing it to collapse under a massive, dusty cloud. "Wow!" exclaimed Penelope, her eyes wide with amazement. "We did it!" Moments later, distant figures emerged from the settling dust cloud like ants from a nest, scattering in all directions. They could hear the shouts of the guards and the occasional sound of a musket being discharged. One group of figures started heading in their direction. "Look!" shouted Herbert. "It must be the crew. Let's go meet them. They might need some help." They dashed off the ship, running as fast as they could towards the crew, their forms becoming clearer as they approached. It was then that Penelope spotted a horse galloping towards them, having broken free from its shackles amidst the chaos caused by the cannon fire. As the horse approached, she stepped out gently, calling out, "Whoa, boy, whoa," and caught him by the reins. The horse was fully tacked up and ready to ride. Meanwhile, outside the prison, Charles assembled his crew and then ordered them to return to the ship with all haste. The captain realized that the guard commander was an efficient leader. He had only been distracted for a few brief moments by the attack on the prison, and had already organized his subordinates to recapture prisoners. For a moment, their eyes met. On seeing the captain, the guard commander immediately dispatched a platoon of soldiers to pursue the crew and himself, with a loud cry, and pointed in the captain's direction. The captain rapidly sized up the situation. To his right was the seawall, and to his left, a galleon. Without hesitation, he ran up the gangplank onto the galleon and grabbed hold of a barrel of gunpowder and some flints, conveniently located by one of the cannons. He pulled the cork from the powder barrel and made a trail of powder to the mainmast, then placed the rest of the barrel against the base of the mast, so the gunpowder trail led directly to it. Quickly, he ran back to the starting point of the gunpowder trail, scraped the flints together, and the ensuing sparks ignited the powder trail instantly. He turned and ran back towards the gangplank, diving off the ship and landing hard on the road by the seawall. A moment later, there was a huge explosion. The mast started to wobble and creak before crashing onto the road close to the captain, separating him from the pursuing soldiers and stopping them in their tracks due to the road suddenly being blocked. A musket shot rang out as the captain picked himself up. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his leg. He was hit. He got to his feet and started to run, but the pain was too much, causing him to limp badly. The dust stirred up by the falling mast had temporarily blinded him, so it came as a surprise to hear the sound of a galloping horse nearby. He wiped his eyes and trained them in the direction of the sound. It was Penelope. The horse stopped in an abrupt turn, nearly knocking the captain over anew. Penelope's hand reached out to him. "Get on quickly," she commanded. The captain didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed Penelope's hand, leaping at the same time. He landed squarely behind her as the horse set off in a gallop, wasting no time. By now, the soldiers were starting to climb the obstacle, but time had been bought. The horse and its two passengers neared the ship, passing a man shouting, "Hey, that's my horse!" As they came within earshot, the captain bellowed, "Release the mooring lines." The crew dutifully obeyed, and the ship started to drift away from the pier just as they arrived, still at full gallop. Penelope shouted, "Hang on," and without hesitation, the horse leapt over the widening gap between the ship and the shore, stopping so abruptly that the captain fell off onto the deck. Meanwhile, the man on the dock was still shouting, "That's my horse." The captain got to his feet and hobbled to his cabin, returning momentarily with a bag of coins. Reaching the side of the ship, he shouted, "Here's payment for the horse." He threw the bag into the air, which eventually landed at the man's feet, bursting open and spilling out gold coins. A huge grin appeared on the man's face as he started picking up the coins, knowing he could buy 5 horses with the money. He shouted back, "It's a deal, thank you," just as the soldiers arrived. But it was too late. The ship had sailed. A few futile musket shots rang out, but to no avail. The ship could not now be stopped or boarded. As the ship gained distance from the shore, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. They had managed a daring escape, and it seemed that, for the moment, they were safe. Captain Charles, still in pain from the gunshot wound, limped over to Penelope and extended his hand in gratitude. "Thank you, Penelope. You saved us back there," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Penelope beamed with pride, her cheeks turning a shade pinker. "It was a team effort," she replied modestly, and the crew around her nodded in agreement. With the excitement of the escape behind them, the crew turned their attention to their wounded captain. Burtrum and Herbert helped him to his cabin, where they carefully tended to his injured leg. As they worked on tending to the captain's injured leg, he lamented the loss of the treasure map. "If only we had the map, we could find the treasure and use it to clear my name," he sighed wistfully. Bertram's eyes widened with the realization that he had a photo of the map on his mobile phone, which he had taken before they first time traveled. He excitedly pulled out his phone and showed it to the captain and the crew. The crew, having never seen such a device, stared in awe and disbelief. The captain's eyes widened, and he exclaimed, "It's not sorcery, Herbert chimed in. "It's a mobile phone, a device from our time that allows us to communicate and store information."
Penelope cheekily added, "It's almost like magic, but not quite."
The captain, though still in shock, quickly realized the importance of the map and instructed his first mate, "Make a copy of this map at once. We shall set our course for the Cocos Islands and find the treasure." The first mate carefully copied the map, and the crew adjusted the ship's course accordingly. As they sailed towards the Cocos Islands, the mood on the ship was a mix of excitement and wonder, knowing that they had a chance to find the treasure and clear their captain's name. As evening fell, the captain told a crew member, "Take the horse below to the cargo area and give it some food and straw."
He then turned to the children, asking, "Are you all hungry?" Burtrum and Herbert exchanged glances, their stomachs growling, but hesitated for a moment, remembering the salt pork and weevils in the biscuits from their last adventure with the captain. "No thank you," they replied in unison. Penelope, on the other hand, was more focused on their new equine friend.
"I think I'll name him Thunder," she declared. The children made their way to the cargo area to check on Thunder, who was happily munching on the straw and food provided. They settled down next to him, feeling the warmth of his body as they drifted off to sleep on the ship, exhausted from their thrilling adventure. When they awoke the next morning, they found themselves back in their beds at home. The adventure had come to an end, but the memories of their daring prison break and the time spent with their great-uncle Charles and his crew would remain with them forever. In the morning, Arabella Foghorn was spreading strawberry jam on a warm, buttery croissant as Percival Foghorn munched on his bacon and eggs. It was a bright Saturday morning, and they were both enjoying the peaceful calm of breakfast before the children tumbled down the stairs, as they inevitably would. The sun streamed in through the kitchen window, casting golden rays over the kitchen table. "Isn't it a lovely day?"
Arabella sighed, looking up from her plate. She glanced out the window, expecting to see the garden in its usual state, but instead, her eyes widened in surprise. "Percival, come look at this." Percival peered out the window, startled to see a huge black horse with a saddle and bridle, casually grazing on their lawn. "Good heavens, where did that come from?" Arabella, still in shock, called up the stairs. "Penelope,
Burtrum,
Herbert, come down here, quick, you won't believe what's in the garden."
The children, sensing the excitement in their mother's voice, hurried down the stairs, breathless with anticipation.
They pressed their noses against the window, and gasped in amazement at the sight before them. Penelope's eyes lit up, recognizing the horse as Thunder from their prison break adventure. Just as she was about to blurt out her knowledge, Burtrum caught her eye and shook his head vigorously. Penelope hesitated, realizing the importance of keeping their escapades under wraps. "Can we keep it?" Penelope asked hopefully, trying her best to feign innocence. Arabella and Percival exchanged glances before sighing.
"We'll have to try to find the owner first," Arabella said. "We'll contact the local stables and maybe put a notice in the local paper. If no one claims the horse, then we'll see."
The children nodded, agreeing to the plan. Penelope couldn't help but smile, grateful for the opportunity to keep Thunder.
Meanwhile, Burtrum breathed a sigh of relief, their secret adventure safe for the time being. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, a different kind of excitement was unfolding.
Chapter 6.
Upon arriving in Auckland, New Zealand, Jaco knew he had to prepare thoroughly for the challenges ahead. The treasure he sought might be hidden deep beneath the ocean's surface, and he needed the right gear to find it.
He visited a well-known shop that specialized in diving equipment, carefully selecting the tools he thought would help him succeed.
Jaco wasn't interested in making friends or sharing his plans.
He spoke only when necessary, ensuring he got what he needed without revealing too much.
The shopkeeper tried to engage him in conversation, sharing stories about the sea, but Jaco remained focused on his goal.
Having procured a custom-made diving suit equipped with advanced sensors and sonar technology, designed to work together with a remote-operated underwater vehicle, capable of navigating through debris and conducting detailed surveys, Jaco prepared for the expedition.
Now he had most of the equipment, he needed tuition.
Selecting instructors, paid for their services in silence rather than camaraderie, he began his training in earnest.
Draped in his wetsuit that felt suffocating, Jaco plunged into the frigid waters along the Auckland coast. The marine life was a distraction, an annoyance even, as schools of fish swam around him, interrupting his focus. The days of subaqua training were less a joyous exploration and more a rigorous exercise in skill acquisition. Jaco begrudgingly learned the mechanics of diving, how to use the tank, the hand signals, and the maneuvers needed to survive the depths. Between dives, Jaco, devoid of any friendliness, navigated the city's markets and shops.
He entered stores with disdain, seeking equipment he deemed essential for his mission.
The shopkeepers eyed him warily as he scoured their wares, selecting what he needed without a hint of gratitude. In one shop, the shopkeeper attempted a conversation, sharing stories of lost treasures, but Jaco's responses were curt, his impatience evident as he hastily packed the gear, showing no appreciation for the shopkeeper's tales. With his heart fixated solely on the prize, Jaco prepared the equipment for its journey to Tonga. The gear was a tool, nothing more, a means to unlock the mysteries he sought beneath the waves around Tafahi, just a necessary step in his relentless pursuit of buried treasure. On one training dive, Jaco's reluctant pursuit of diving expertise took an unexpected turn. As he reluctantly delved into the icy depths along the coast, begrudgingly tolerating the marine life's interruptions, a peculiar shift began to unfold within him. Amidst the swaying corals and the shadows of shipwrecks, Jaco stumbled upon a sunken vessel, an eerie relic from a bygone era. The wreck, shrouded in mystery, beckoned him with a haunting allure. Initially, his exploration was driven by practicality, but as he navigated the remnants of the ship, his attitude changed. The shipwreck, a time capsule lost to the sea, captivated Jaco's imagination.
He marveled at the decaying wooden beams that intertwined with the ocean's elements, painting a portrait of history and forgotten tales.
It was as if the rusted metal and encrusted relics whispered stories of adventures long past. In the belly of the sunken vessel, Jaco's skepticism slowly dissolved into fascination. The play of light and shadows danced around him, painting an ethereal picture that seemed straight out of a forgotten legend. For the first time, a hint of awe flickered in Jaco's eyes, a spark of wonder ignited by the secrets hidden in the depths. However, amidst his fascination, reality gave a chilling reminder. A sudden appearance, a small shark darting through the wreckage, jolted Jaco from his reverie.
The creature's sleek, powerful movements were a stark reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the surface.
It was a startling encounter, a glimpse into the unpredictable nature of the ocean, its inhabitants, and the risks he might face.
Jaco's pulse quickened, his senses heightened by the unexpected visitor.
It was a stark reminder that the pursuit of treasure held perilous uncertainties. As the shark disappeared into the deep blue, Jaco's mind snapped back to his objective, the buried treasure of the Cocos Islands. The encounter lingered in his thoughts, a sobering realization of the potential dangers he might encounter on his mission.
Yet, amid the thrill and the newfound appreciation for the ocean's beauty, a single thought persisted: the untold secrets and the promise of a treasure waiting to be unveiled.
With a newfound respect for the perils of the deep, Jaco's focus sharpened on the ultimate prize, even as he acknowledged the risks that lay ahead. With his heart fixated solely on the prize, Jaco prepared the equipment for its journey to Tonga. It was a necessary step in his relentless pursuit of buried treasure. During a training dive, Jaco's reluctance shifted. Delving into the icy depths along the coast, he stumbled upon a sunken vessel, an eerie relic from a bygone era. Initially pragmatic, his attitude changed as he explored the ship's remnants. The shipwreck, a time capsule lost to the sea, captivated Jaco's imagination.
He marveled at the decaying wooden beams and rusted relics that whispered stories of adventures long past.
In the belly of the sunken vessel, Jaco's skepticism dissolved into fascination. The play of light and shadows painted an ethereal picture, sparking wonder within him for the secrets hidden in the depths.
Reality intruded, a sudden appearance, a small shark darting through the wreckage.
Its sleek, powerful movements reminded Jaco of the hazards lurking beneath the surface. The encounter, a glimpse into the ocean's unpredictability, snapped Jaco back to his objective, the buried treasure of the Cocos Islands. The encounter lingered, a sobering realization of potential dangers. Yet, amid newfound appreciation for the ocean's beauty, Jaco's focus sharpened on the ultimate prize, a treasure waiting to be unveiled. With a newfound respect for the perils of the deep, he honed in on his goal despite acknowledging the risks ahead. The sun blazed down on the Tonga boatyard, casting a dazzling array of shimmering reflections across the water where numerous boats bobbed gently in the harbor. Jaco, a young-looking man with a stern expression, walked into the yard.
He wore a hat low over his eyes and carried a duffel bag. He approached a weathered boat owner, a stout and friendly Tongan man named Sione, who was busy tending to his fishing boat.
Jaco said gruffly, "You Sione?"
Sione replied with a smile, "That's me.
What can I do for you, my friend?"
Jaco, straight to the point, said, "I need a boat."
Headed to Tafahi.
Sione raised an eyebrow and asked, "Tafahi, huh?
That's a bit off the beaten path. What's the purpose of your trip?" Jaco, guarded, replied, "None of your business.
You got a boat or not?" Sione, unfazed, said, "I do have a boat that can take you there, but it's not an easy journey.
The waters can get rough.
You need an experienced hand at the wheel."
Jaco, reluctantly, said, "Fine, I'll pay extra for that experience, and I need someone to help me with some gear, too."
Sione, curious, inquired, "Gear, you say?
What kind of gear are we talking about?"
Jaco, still guarded, answered, "Diving equipment. It was dispatched from Auckland. I'll need it for my trip." Sione nodded and said, "I see.
Well, that changes things a bit.
Diving gear can be delicate.
I can help you with that, and I've got a vehicle that can be used to collect it, too." Jaco, grudgingly, said, "Good.
Make sure it's ready as soon as possible." Sione, smiling, said, "You're a man in a hurry. I'll make sure everything's set up for you."
"What's your name?"
Jaco, reluctantly, answered, "Jaco." Sione introduced himself. "Well, Jaco, I'm Sione.
I'll get you to Tafahi and back safely.
Let's work out the details."
After finalizing their arrangement, Jaco and Sione embarked on their journey to collect the diving gear, the truck humming along the coastal roads of Tonga. The air was filled with anticipation, yet their interaction was minimal, marked by Sione's occasional attempts at conversation and Jaco's terse responses. At the storage facility, Jaco meticulously inspected each piece of equipment, ensuring everything was in order for his underwater expedition.
Satisfied, they loaded the gear onto Sione's sturdy, well-maintained boat.
As they set sail for Tafahi, Jaco remained mostly silent, lost in his thoughts and plans.
Sione, sensing Jaco's need for solitude, focused on navigating the boat through the gentle swells of the ocean.
The journey was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the boat and the soothing sound of waves. Upon arriving at Tafahi, Jaco nodded in gratitude to Sione, who wished him luck with a friendly clap on the back before departing. Left to his own devices, Jaco spent the rest of the day exploring the rugged landscape of the island.
He walked along its pristine beaches, through its small villages, and around its bustling marketplaces, absorbing the sights and sounds.
As evening approached, Jaco found a modest but comfortable accommodation, a small inn run by a local family.
He spent the night there, his mind racing with thoughts of the treasure and the challenges that lay ahead.
The next morning, Jaco set out in search of breakfast, his appetite finally catching up with him.
He stumbled upon a quaint cafe nestled in the heart of the island.
The cafe was a lively hub of activity, filled with locals enjoying their morning routines. As he sipped on his bitter coffee, Jaco overheard fragments of a conversation from a nearby table that caught his attention. "And they say it was children who freed Captain Charles from the prison," one of the locals said, his voice a blend of disbelief and wonder. Jaco's interest piqued at the mention of Captain Charles, a name intimately tied to his quest.
He leaned closer, eager to catch more of the conversation.
"The legend goes that these weren't ordinary children," the other local continued. "They appeared out of nowhere, right when Captain Charles needed them most.
Helped him escape, they did, like a fairy tale come to life."
Unable to resist, Jaco turned towards them and interjected, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. Are you talking about Captain Charles Foghorn?" The locals, surprised by his sudden interest, nodded.
"Yes, that's the one. He was falsely accused, all because of Captain Thompson's deceit."
"But the children, they say they were time travelers, aiding Captain Charles in the most extraordinary way." Intrigued by this folklore, which he would usually dismiss, Jaco leaned back, contemplating the possibility of a connection between this legend and his treasure hunt. "Interesting," he mused. the tale of time-traveling children intertwining with his quest in a way he hadn't anticipated.
His thoughts, however, soon shifted back to the pressing task at hand.
Jacko glanced around the cafe discreetly, ensuring no prying eyes were upon him.
Satisfied with the lack of attention, he reached into his jacket pocket and carefully pulled out the treasure map. He unfolded it just enough to view it himself, keen on keeping it hidden from the casual observer.
The map, aged and delicate, bore cryptic markings and symbols that hinted at the treasure's location. Jacko studied it intently, his eyes tracing over the intricate lines and notations.
He knew that understanding this map was key to finding what he had been searching for.
As he scrutinized the map, his mind worked feverishly, trying to piece together the clues that would lead him to the treasure.
Yet, Jacko remained cautious. He was aware that a map of such value could easily attract unwanted attention. He positioned the map under the table, glancing up occasionally to ensure he remained unnoticed.
The tales of time-traveling children and a falsely accused pirate captain added a layer of mystery to his quest, making him even more determined to unravel the truth. With a final look at the map, Jacko memorized the key details and landmarks.
He refolded it with the utmost care and tucked it back into his pocket. Finishing his coffee, he stood up, leaving some coins on the table for the bill.
As he stepped out of the cafe, Jacko blended into the crowd, his mind focused and alert.
He knew that his adventure on Tafahi was just beginning, and that every step he took brought him closer to the hidden treasure that had eluded many before him.
Jacko stepped out of the cafe, the warm island breeze tousling his hair. As he walked through the bustling market streets of Tafahi, his mind churned with conflicting emotions. The tale of the time-traveling children gnawed at the edges of his skepticism.
Legends and folklore, he muttered to himself, shaking his head. Yet, a small voice inside whispered, "What if there's more to it?" He paused by a stall selling intricate carvings of sea creatures.
The artisan smiled at him, offering a carved wooden dolphin. Jacko waved him off, but his gaze lingered on the craftsmanship.
For a moment, he allowed himself to appreciate the beauty around him, the vibrant colors, the laughter of children playing nearby, the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. Focus, he reminded himself, clenching his fists.
The world was full of distractions, but he had a mission. Memories of his past failures surfaced, fueling his determination. This treasure wasn't just about wealth, it was proof that he could accomplish something monumental.
"Nothing will stand in my way," he thought fiercely.
The obstacles ahead were many: unpredictable seas, hidden dangers beneath the waves, and perhaps even competition from others who sought the same prize. But Jacko was resolute.
He would dive into the depths of the ocean and emerge victorious.
As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the island, Jacko made his way back to his lodgings.
Tomorrow would be a pivotal day. Clutching the map securely in his pocket, he felt a surge of anticipation. "Soon," he whispered into the twilight. "Very soon." Chapter 7. Ever since the mysterious arrival of Thunder, the large black horse, in the Foghorns' garden, life had taken an amusing turn, especially at the local stables where he was now temporarily housed. Arabella Foghorn, diligent in her quest to find Thunder's rightful owner, had no idea about the horse's time-traveling origins and the secret pact of silence between the children.
One sunny afternoon, the children decided to visit Thunder at the stables.
Penelope, with her natural flair for riding, was excited to show her skills, while Burtrum and Herbert, spurred on by a mix of curiosity and bravado, had their own plans to ride the majestic horse.
As they approached Thunder's stall, Penelope confidently patted the horse, whispering sweet nothings into his ear. Burtrum, feeling a surge of confidence, declared, "Watch this, I'm going to ride Thunder just like a real cowboy." Herbert, always ready for a challenge, nodded in agreement, though his nervous glances betrayed his apprehension. Burtrum, with a boost from Herbert, clumsily clambered onto Thunder. The horse, sensing the inexperience of his rider, decided to have a little fun. With a sudden, playful jerk, Burtrum found himself sliding sideways, his arms flailing comically in the air. His cowboy dreams shattered as he landed with a squelchy thud in the nearby muck heap, much to the delight of Penelope, who burst into fits of laughter. "Oh, Burtrum, you look like a mud pie," Penelope exclaimed between giggles,
her eyes sparkling with amusement. Flushed and splattered with muck, Burtrum could do nothing but join in the laughter, his initial embarrassment turning into chuckles.
Not to be outdone, Herbert, bolstered by Bertram's misadventure, decided it was his turn to show off his riding prowess.
"Here goes nothing," he muttered to himself as he attempted a more graceful mount onto Thunder. However, Thunder, still in a playful mood, gently trotted towards a low-hanging branch.
Unprepared for the sudden movement, Herbert ducked, but not quickly enough. The branch caught him squarely in the chest, sending him tumbling backwards, not into the muck heap, but into a water trough, causing a spectacular splash. Drenched from head to toe, Herbert emerged from the trough, spitting out a mouthful of water, only to be greeted by the sight of Penelope rolling on the ground, laughing uncontrollably. "Looks like you went for a swim instead, Herbert,"
Penelope managed to say through her laughter.
Herbert, trying to maintain his dignity, stood up, dripping wet, and joined in the laughter. "Well, that was refreshing," he said, trying to shake off the water. As the afternoon sun began to set, the children, muddy and wet, but full of laughter and joy, decided it was time to head back home. They promised Thunder a more dignified visit next time, as they bid him goodbye. That evening, after a hearty dinner, Burtrum, Herbert, and Penelope gathered in Bertram's room. The events of the day replayed vividly in their minds. "Do you think Captain Charles found the treasure?"
Penelope asked softly, her eyes reflecting the glow of the bedside lamp. Burtrum shrugged, a mix of hope and uncertainty in his expression. "I like to think so. He deserves a happy ending after everything he's been through."
Herbert leaned against the wall, his arms crossed thoughtfully. "If he did, maybe it changed history."
"Perhaps he cleared his name. Or maybe," Penelope added with a mischievous smile, "we'll get to see him again and find out ourselves."
The boys exchanged a glance.
The idea of another adventure was both thrilling and daunting.
"Would you want to go back?"
Burtrum asked. Penelope nodded eagerly.
"Absolutely. There's so much more to explore." They all laughed, the sound filling the room with warmth.
Despite the dangers and uncertainties, they knew one thing for sure: they made a great team.
As they prepared for bed, Burtrum gazed out the window at the starry sky. "Good night, Captain Charles," he whispered.
"Until we meet again."
Epilogue. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the Foghorn residence, Burtrum, Herbert, and Penelope stood gazing at the mysterious portrait of Captain Charles Foghorn, their minds teeming with excitement and curiosity. Their recent time-traveling escapades had not only brought them closer to their legendary ancestor, but also ignited a burning desire to uncover the hidden truths of the past. Unbeknownst to them, Jaco, far across the ocean, was meticulously piecing together clues that would lead him to the very treasure they yearned to find. The stage was set for an extraordinary journey, one that would entangle the paths of the children and Jaco in a quest riddled with mystery, adventure, and the echoes of time.
As they retired to bed,
the map, a photograph on Bertram's phone, glowed faintly in the moonlit room, a harbinger of the thrilling hunt that lay ahead in the timeless treasure of Captain Charles.